Welcome to Real Estate Investing Abundance, the show for busy, fulfilled professionals like you to learn how to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. Now, here is your host, Dr. Alan Lomax.
Hello, enlightened investors. I'm your host, Dr. Alan, and it is a pleasure to be with you today as we explore the inspirational journey of how our guest, while just starting out, was also able to scale up. Hayden Harrington is a real estate entrepreneur focused on large-scale multifamily syndication. He currently has $85 million in apartments under management and is actively growing that portfolio. So Hayden, take us into the show and share a memorable experience from your formative years.
Awesome. Well, yeah, first of all, just thank you for having me on the show, Alan. Really grateful for the time and opportunity. One formidable experience, I guess, would be, growing up, I was kind of born into real estate. My dad, he was, an engineer by trade, but dabbled in real estate. And about every other year growing up, he'd pick up a rental and a flip opportunity. So as a byproduct of that, I kind of got dragged into it from a very young age, and have a ton of awesome memories just doing work with him on those properties. One in particular, we actually rehabbed and flipped a home in Pennsylvania that was built in the late 1800s. And, that was an incredible experience just to see the different building techniques back then. You'd literally have studs in the wall that had live edges, and it was just incredible, square nails, lath and plaster behind the walls. It was just really, really interesting, the way they built back then. And then also because, we've flipped and renovated some newer homes too, just to see the difference. So, it's a lot of fun, especially getting to do that with your dad. It's a great bonding experience. And so getting to grow up in that environment was, I felt very fortunate for that, because not a lot of people that, they see real estate, but they don't know how to get started. They don't know how to get in the door, or they're afraid to take that first step. And, thankfully, my dad was the one to kind of do that and, pulled me into it along the way. So those were, have tons and tons of great memories of rehabbing homes with him. But, I'd say that's definitely one that hits home for me. And, I think it really set me up to, down this real estate path, and just planted the seed to want to go bigger, really.
Well, what a great way for an entrepreneur to start out in childhood and adolescence. And so that took you right into real estate. And you started off with a big bang. I think you said something like $35 million on your first deal. So take us down that road and tell us about that first deal and how you got into that.
Sure. Yeah, it was a long process, actually. For a few years, I just tried to understand. Well, actually, for a few years, I tried to do it myself, and I realized that was not a great idea because, for one, with no track record on the commercial side, it's very hard to get investors to want to hand you over lots of money when you have no experience doing that. So for a long time, it was just a dream. And then after really getting nowhere, I realized, okay, I've got to change my approach. What I've been doing is not getting me anywhere. Reading the books, listening to different podcasts and stuff, is all great information. But if you're not taking the action, you're not going to get anywhere. And realized that one day and said, okay, now I need to change my approach. I need to get out there. I need to surround myself around with the people that are actually doing this, because I've got some misinformation right now. So started going out to meetups and just trying to network with people, because this is real estate is a relationship business, and it's a team sport. And, I knew I just needed to be around the people that were actually doing deals. So started to network and meet people and just say, hey, can I take you out to lunch? I want to pick your brain. I got questions for you. Would love to learn. And then as I started meeting people like that, I started to, offer just to work for free, because I knew I needed my foot in the door. And, surprisingly, a few of those people actually turned me down. I was kind of scratching my head. I was like, man, I'm smart, I'm capable. I've got some real estate background and experience. So I'm not coming into this totally green. And, I was kind of scratching my head, like, why, what's wrong with my offer? And so the more I started to think about it, the more I realized that when I put myself in their shoes, I'm not really offering value. I'm asking for a lot of value, but I'm not really offering any, because if somebody that's experienced has a lot going on and this kid comes along and wants to work for free, well, I'm going to have to teach them everything, right? So as soon as I realized that, I said, okay, now I gotta change my approach again. So every hurdle, every challenge, every roadblock kind of presents an opportunity to refine your pitch and get better and to learn and progress. And so, after a few of those closed doors, I started to realize, okay, now's the time, to change my approach and try and figure out ways to offer more value. And, I looked around and I'd been getting to know the space a little bit. And I realized that the two things that offer the most value is if you can bring a deal or if you can bring capital. Everything else, investor relations or underwriting or asset management, all that stuff can be hired. The two main things that really are intangible is, hey, do you have investors that trust you, and or could you bring a deal to the table, an actual deal? And so I realized that, okay, finding a deal, especially here in Dallas, it's extremely competitive here. It's very regular to have 30, 40 offers on properties and, 10, 15 groups invest in finals. So I was like, okay, the likelihood of being able to get a deal on the hook and bring a good one to the table is very slim. So I settled on the capital route and said, okay, I want to work on, building a brand and building an investor base that I can bring equity to these deals. So, I didn't have a deep network of people that would trust me with, 100 grand a piece, but I also didn't want that to stop me from making it happen. So I ended up pitching the idea to my now business partner, Dustin, to start a meetup here in Dallas. He said, if I don't have them, I can find them. So the idea was to start a networking event and to attract people. And over time, that grew quite a bit. And, we started working together. We started underwriting deals and eventually offering on deals together as a result of that, because, that kind of dating process with your partners, I think, is very important. You got to understand who you're getting in business with. And so, the meetup was a great way to get to know each other, how we worked, how we communicated, and kind of lay the foundation of our now partnership. And, eventually ended up offering on more deals. And it's kind of funny. The first offer we got accepted was in March of 2020. So for everybody that knows what happened in March of 2020, that's when basically the whole world shut down. So due to the pandemic. So that was an interesting time. I remember we got accepted on a Monday and, by midweek, everybody was locking down and we didn't know if we should be excited or afraid. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, we weren't under contract on that deal. So we weren't on the hook for anything and ended up having to rescind that offer by the end of the week, just because everything was so changing so rapidly. So that was tough. We'd been working essentially a year together, get an offer accepted, and then a global pandemic. So that was an interesting way to get introduced to the commercial space for sure. But, we didn't let it deter us. We kept underwriting. We kept, talking to brokers, talking to lenders, trying to understand the space, reporting everything back to our investors so that they knew what was going on, and took a very active approach. And, up to that point, everything we had really been underwriting was B and C class deals here in Dallas. So you're talking 60s and 70s for the most part. And, the more the pandemic dragged on, the more we realized there's a lot of risk with those properties. Typically with B and C class properties, working class people, working class tenants, so they've got to go to their jobs. They can't work from home. That was a big risk. So we wanted a tenant base that could work from home. Everybody's stuck at home, and we want a tenant base that can still pay the rent. So that was a big criteria for us. And then the second one was, well, if everything's shutting down and the eviction moratorium was going on, so you couldn't evict. So if you've got the likelihood of people not being able to pay the rent and then something going wrong on the property side, a chiller going out or a boiler going out or anything like that, having a big capital expense, that's just going to magnify the problems. So we started to shift to newer properties as a result, because newer properties have a better tenant base. They can work from home, a little bit more flexible there. And then the property itself has better bones. They're not as old. So the likelihood of something going wrong was slimmer. So that was our approach for 2020. That's really how we shifted. Ended up in October of 2020, getting an offer actually accepted on a property down in Houston, which is where I'm actually from. So knew the market pretty well. And it was a 2012 asset, 228 units on the northeast side there. And we bought it for 128 a door, which was a little over 29 million. And that was the first deal.
Well, that is an impressive journey. A couple of questions here. One is, you started Meetup. You were saying that it was difficult to find deals in Dallas. I would think that in Dallas there are oodles and gobs of meetups already functioning. So when thinking, that wasn't an easy undertaking in and of itself. So how did you get that meetup started? How did you market that? How did you attract people to your meetup when they had many, many other options?
Great question. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There's probably a meetup every night in Dallas. So, I went to a number of them. And before I pitched the idea, I wanted to understand, the competition. Other syndicators in the space, they're your competition. And so if you want to stand out, if you want investors to trust you, you got to do something different. If you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, how do you expect to stand out, especially if you're new to the space? If you want to make a reputation for yourself, you don't want to blend in. And so the more I started going to networking events, the more I realized the problem with them to begin with, which is, they're typically hosted at restaurants. Typically, it's very noisy. You typically sit down at a table, you eat food, which it's not that great when you're trying to network, talking to people with a mouthful of food. And also the problem with restaurants is you get locked into your seat. So you sit down at a table, you've got two people next to you, and that's who you probably spend the next hour and a half talking with. And, that's great and all, and restaurants are easy because most restaurants say, hey, yeah, bring tons of people. We want lots of business. Come on, we'll give you space. So it's easy to set up, but it's not conducive for networking. And so, I'm naturally more introverted, and I would go to these things and I'd walk away with 2 business cards, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is going to take forever. This is going to take me years to build a sizable network to be able to go and take these deals down or to find the right partner. And, that's when I had my light bulb moment. And I said, well, maybe other people are thinking the same. And so the whole approach was, okay, number one, I want to get it out of a restaurant. I don't want to do it at a restaurant because it's not a good environment. And then 2 is I want to make it easy for people like me to be able to network. So first thing we did was we held it at a title office. So we controlled the environment. We controlled the space and got it in an office space. We had food catered from the title company. And then, we kind of made it, we had an educational aspect, and then we also had a networking aspect, because some networking events you'll go to, it's just a presentation and they just speak to you for an hour or 2. And, that's great. It's a lot of great information, but I really want to network too. So we can kind of combine it. We made them 2-hour events. The first hour is networking. The second hour is a presentation. So you get a bit of both. But during that first hour, we would force people to mix it up. So every 10 minutes, we would literally run around the room and ring a cowbell for people. And we called it your graceful exit, because it's always hard. If you're talking to somebody, if we're having a conversation, say, okay, it's nice to meet you. I want to go talk to somebody else now, right? It's not always easy to bring that up. You kind of want to just keep the conversation going. And so we use the cowbell as your cue. Hey, this is your graceful exit, exchange information with who you're talking with, and go meet somebody else, because this is what we're here for. Basically acknowledge what everybody's thinking. And people loved it. And so, I think our first event had 25, and then the next one had 40, and then 60, and then we were 100 plus every month after that. Ended up having to rent out a huge conference room at the Westin Hotel in the mid-cities of Dallas, and had a huge space. Ended up getting a stage for speakers and turned into, quite an event. But, I think it was really important to do something different, and just, I'm not saying our networking event was the best, but it was different than what everybody else was doing. And I think that's the most important thing.
Well, that's impressive to me that you got 25 on your first meeting. How'd you get those 25 people?
Yeah, a lot of those people, we filled the room with. So, a lot of industry professionals that we worked with and stuff like that, we would invite and have them come. So half the people we just filled the room with. And then the other half, just, came out and tried it. My partner, Dustin, he has a great reputation in the space. And so he knew a lot of people. And, from there, word just started to spread. we were consistent with our marketing and everything. Again, just trying to be very polished, very put together. And, I think people started to notice and just kind of grew over time.
So when did you start the Meetup?
We started it in about March or April of 2019.
Okay. Well, that grew really rapidly, and your network grew very, very rapidly from that point on there. And so that took you 2019 and into 2020. You had your first deal on the books there. That's really quite remarkable. So here you are. You've never done a commercial real estate deal, and yet primarily through this link, through the Meetup, you were able to attract potential investors. What was it about you and your partner that gave investors the confidence to come to you?
Yeah, great question. Basically the whole idea was, especially with the Meetup, is we want everything to be put together. We want our systems and processes in place so that, the experience they have with us at an event may translate to the experience that they would have if they invested with us. I always say the little details make the biggest difference. And so everything we put out towards investors or on social media, or the experience that they have, we try and think through every little detail, and that helps translate to trust. People think that, you care for their experience, you care for them, and that will help, grow their trust over time, and also your ability to raise equity. Prior to us teaming up, my partner had done 10 syndications, so he was definitely not new to this. At that point, he had 6 deals had gone full cycle too. So he had a great reputation in the space. And then together we were just able to really amplify it.
So he had done quite a bit and had a lot of experience. Why was he interested in working with you as a partner?
Yeah, great question. Looking back, I always think, man, he took a big chance on me to, his reputation was on the line when we teamed up to start the Meetup. And, I knew that going into it because I frankly didn't have any reputation in the commercial space. So my whole goal was, hey, I want to make him look good. I want to present him in the best light possible. That's how I was able to bring value to the table. And on top of that, we're big on our character, our morals, our goals are very similar. And that was important. And also, as the more we worked together, the more that was able to come to the surface and be revealed, and made that decision of working together that much easier. So that's really why I always tell people, like, take your time. Don't be so rushed into finding a partner and getting into things, because these deals themselves are, we underwrite for 5-6 year business plans. Like, you could hold these things for 5 or 6 years. What happens if they go south? Or you're going to have bumps along the way. You're dealing with people and apartments. Stuff's going to happen. So you need to be able to work well with others and who you want to team up with. And so it was a great process just for us to get to know each other, really. And over time, we worked really well together. We've been really big on systematizing everything so that, our communication is really good. Our processes are really good when we're dealing with, whether we're dealing with trying to do an event, or whether we're kicking off a raise, which we're going through right now, or, whether we're asset managing one of these properties. So, that was really important, just to really know and trust who we're working with. And it takes time to develop that. But I think you can really, if you trust your gut, you can really get to, have a sense of somebody as soon as you meet them. And, as long as you trust that and don't ignore details that you shouldn't, I think that's very important.
So I'm taking it the Meetup was your initiative, and you went to him with the proposal and the idea on that. And,
yeah, I did.
And he saw an opportunity in that for you, but also for himself in that. So that's what you're talking about. And I mean, I think that's a good illustration there of how you were able to add value. I mean, you said the best way is, of course, bringing deals or bringing money, which of course that is. But in this case, in putting this relationship, you were able to add value just by really bringing a concept and an idea to the table, which is impressive really in and of itself. What kind of relationship did you have before you partnered?
It was, we just met and networked through networking. And, I took him out to lunch a couple times. I think on the second time, that's when I pitched the idea. And we had been texting back and forth, and he was, kind enough to answer questions and just take the time to to talk with me, which frankly meant a lot because there was some that, absolutely didn't have the time of day. So, that meant a lot, and very laid back, down to earth guy. And he took a chance, and, we just started the Meetup. It wasn't a formal partnership from the get-go by any means, because that's, again, especially if you're coming under one flag, we were kind of doing it separate but together at first. And the more we worked together, the more we understood, hey, yeah, this is working. We like working with each other. That's when we formalized and came under the momentum flag together. But that took a while. That took some time for sure.
Well, wonderful concrete illustrations of how to network within, like you mentioned, you're an introvert, and you set up a situation where you as an introvert could get something out of that. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I can go to meetups, and they could be 2-hour, 3-hour, 3-day events, and I could leave with 3 cards and get nothing out of it. So knowing yourself and coming up with an idea, presenting that, and finding a partner to work with that all took a lot of initiative. And so we just have a few minutes here, but tell us about how you had to, prior to all of that coming together, you really had to develop a mindset that said, I can do this, I can get into this space, I can deal with the discouragements and so on and so forth. How did you develop that mindset?
Yeah, great question. It was kind of a fluid process. I don't know if I could pin one thing on it for sure, but there's a number of things. I grew up playing sports. I played baseball growing up from a very young age, and came from the Woodlands, Texas, and very, very competitive schools. And so I just grew up in a competitive environment. And then on top of that, as I was going off to college, my parents had a pretty rough divorce. And that's really when I started thinking for myself. I said, okay, I want to finally start to think for myself and not what everybody else tells me to do. And I think that was a very important paradigm shift for myself. I didn't turn to acting out or anything like that. I just turned inside and started to do a lot of personal development, understand, who am I? How do I want to think? How do I want to be? And so I started reading, started picking up books. And, I don't think through high school, I don't think I even finished a book cover to cover till I was, 18, 19 years old. So just fell in love with reading, fell in love with learning and growing. And, I think that was huge for this mindset. I don't believe in impossible. I think the word itself is pretty ironic because it's literally I'm possible, just looked at from a different perspective. So, I don't believe in any limitations. I think the only limitations are the ones that are self-imposed on ourselves. So, that was, those two things kind of led to really developing and down that path of personal development. Sometimes the greatest challenges we go through offer the most opportunity for learning. And, when you look at things from that light, you find gratitude in everything. So it definitely wasn't easy to go through. A lot of hard work went into the sports, and a lot of pain through the divorce. But, you come outside, you come out on the other side in a better spot, especially if you ask meaningful questions for yourself and do a lot of internal work. And, that's really the path that it led me down. The overarching theme of kind of my mindset is, there's good in everything if we're willing to look for it. And so anytime there's a struggle, anytime there's a challenge, that's really what I come back to. And I ask, okay, what's the good here? And that enables me to really push through these challenges. When those partners or when those people that I offered to work for free turn you down, that's hard. It's hard to keep the motivation. Or you work for a year and then you get a deal accepted and the whole world shuts down. Like, it's hard to keep going. But if you're only focused on what's going wrong, you're missing out the other side of the equation, which is the opportunity to get better. And so, those two things are kind of, sticking points in my mind that really led to the culmination of this mindset.
Well, Hayden, tell our enlightened investors what you have to offer them and how it is they can take advantage of what you have to offer.
Yeah. The great thing about this business is you kind of have to have somebody, you get to extend one arm up and one arm down, right? Somebody has to help you in, and you get the opportunity to help others do the same. So, I'm always open to answer questions. And, if people want to grab lunch or coffees and stuff like that, I'm always open to that, and just to be a resource for people, because if somebody didn't take a chance on me, I wouldn't be where I am. So, extremely grateful for Dustin and all that he's done for me. And, I want to be able to offer the same to others that are trying to get into the space as well.
Enlightened investors, we'll have Dustin's contact information in the show notes, but that is momentummultifamily.com, and his email is hayden@momentummultifamily.com. Dustin, it's been a delight having you today. Enjoyed the conversation immensely. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Alan.
And enlightened investors, thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.